In a dry, sunlit, and rocky environment, a mongoose faces a coiled cobra. The mongoose is vocalizing with its mouth wide open, showing aggression. The scene shifts to a dusty canyon. The mongoose lunges at the cobra, kicking up dust. It tumbles, rolls on its back, and quickly gets back on its feet to face the snake again. In a lush forest on a dirt path, a cobra stands tall with its hood flared. A mongoose cautiously approaches from the side, and a flock of birds flies through the background. On dry, cracked earth, a mongoose slowly circles a coiled cobra, maintaining a safe distance while assessing its opponent. In an arid field of dry grass, a mongoose makes a lightning-fast feint attack, darting past a brown cobra, which recoils in defense. A mongoose launches a fierce, dust-kicking assault on a cobra, which dodges and weaves to avoid the repeated aggressive lunges. In a dense forest, a mongoose cautiously approaches a cobra on the leaf-littered ground. The cobra opens its mouth in a threatening display. In a forest clearing at sunset, the mongoose circles a coiled cobra, their silhouettes framed by the golden light filtering through the trees. In a rocky, scrubland environment with mountains in the background, a mongoose dodges a strike from a black cobra, which has its mouth wide open. A mongoose attacks a coiled cobra, leaping and kicking up dust. The cobra dodges the attack and raises its hood, mouth agape in a defensive posture. In a sandy, rocky desert, a mongoose stares down a tall, stationary cobra that is flicking its tongue. A mongoose bites at the body of a cobra on the cracked desert floor. The cobra thrashes, trying to escape the mongoose's grip. A mongoose circles and kicks dust at a coiled cobra, which remains in a defensive, upright position, ready to strike. In a dark, moody forest, a mongoose cautiously approaches a cobra that has a visible bloody wound on its neck. On a forest floor under a stormy, dark sky, a mongoose attacks a cobra, which dodges. The mongoose quickly retreats as the snake lunges, and then both animals disappear from the frame. A cobra slithers away on cracked, dry earth. A mongoose runs into the frame, and the snake quickly turns to face it. In a dusty, rocky area, a mongoose attacks a cobra. A second mongoose joins the fight, and together they grapple with and bite the snake. An injured mongoose, with a visible bloody wound on its back, cautiously circles a cobra in a sandy area. A mongoose dodges a cobra's strike and then lunges, biting the cobra's head in a cloud of dust. In a dark jungle at sunset, a mongoose and cobra face each other on the leaf-covered ground. In a sunlit forest, a mongoose launches a furious attack, darting in and out and kicking up a large cloud of dust. A mongoose lunges at the cobra's tail, bites it, and then quickly leaps back as the snake thrashes wildly. On sandy ground, a mongoose dodges a cobra's strike, kicking up a spray of sand as it moves with incredible speed. In a dark, misty forest, a mongoose with glowing red eyes approaches a menacing cobra with a bloody mark on its hood. In a swirling sandstorm, a mongoose and cobra battle, their forms partially obscured by the thick, blowing dust. In a dark forest, a mongoose cautiously approaches a black cobra that is lying low to the ground. A larger, fluffier mongoose attacks a cobra, biting its back. The cobra writhes and tries to defend itself. An injured mongoose bites the tail of a cobra, which is trying to flee across the sand. The cobra remains in a defensive pose. A mongoose with a bloody wound on its back faces a cobra in a forest. The mongoose appears tired but determined. Two mongooses engage in a chaotic brawl in a dusty, sunlit area with a fallen cobra, tumbling and wrestling with each other. On a large rock overlooking a lush green valley, a mongoose approaches a coiled cobra. In a rocky pine forest, a black cobra stands tall as a mongoose cautiously circles it on the leaf-strewn ground. In a mystical-looking forest with golden sunbeams, a cobra on a mossy rock faces a mongoose as a large bird flies overhead. On a cliffside with a massive waterfall in the background, a mongoose with its mouth open faces a coiled cobra. In a sunlit jungle clearing among large tree roots, a mongoose cautiously circles a waiting cobra. On a high, rocky cliff with foggy canyon, a mongoose circles a cobra as the snake flicks its tongue. In a sunlit forest, a mongoose approaches a cobra near some rocks. Colorful butterflies begin to flutter all around them. The mongoose then attacks the snake. In a mountain stream filled with mossy rocks, a cobra waits as a mongoose approaches, with blue dragonflies hovering over the water. In a misty, moss-covered canyon, a mongoose on the forest floor looks up at a cobra coiled on a large, mossy boulder. At sunset, on a rocky mountaintop, a mongoose approaches a coiled cobra as bats fly in the twilight sky. In a dense bamboo forest, a mongoose hops and feints, testing the defenses of the cobra standing before it. On a rocky, sun-drenched slope, a mongoose approaches a cobra, their forms backlit by the bright sun, creating a hazy, dreamlike effect. In a lush, green jungle filled with ferns and moss, a mongoose with its mouth open confronts a cobra. In a clearing near a mossy log, a mongoose cautiously approaches a coiled cobra. In a clearing in front of a large waterfall, a mongoose on wet rocks faces a massive coiled cobra. On a high, rocky peak under a clear blue sky, a mongoose faces a cobra as several large birds circle high above them. In a jungle clearing with bright sunbeams shining down, a mongoose and cobra have a tense standoff. Under a large tree in a savanna-like environment with mountains in the distance, a mongoose approaches a coiled cobra. In a beautiful mountain meadow filled with colorful flowers, a mongoose confronts a cobra as butterflies flutter around them. On a sandy, sunlit slope with a pine forest in the background, a mongoose stands ready to face the cobra. Beside a rushing river in a canyon, a mongoose climbs onto a rock to face a cobra. In a dense, mossy forest filled with ferns, a mongoose with its mouth open aggressively confronts a black cobra. On a high, rocky overlook with snow-capped mountains and a winding river below, a mongoose faces a cobra as a large eagle flies overhead. Between two large boulders, a mongoose confronts a cobra in a shady, secluded spot. On a sunlit, mossy rock in a pine forest, a mongoose and cobra face each other. In a vast, green meadow with snow-capped mountains in the background, a mongoose approaches a cobra amidst the tall grass. On a rocky cliff at sunset, with a huge waterfall in the background, a green-tinted cobra with its mouth open faces the mongoose. At the base of a large, gnarled tree, a mongoose dodges a strike from a white-marked cobra. In a cold, icy environment, a mongoose stands in a shallow, rushing stream near a glacier, confronting a cobra in the water. In a forest at sunset with mountains in the background, a mongoose and cobra hold a final, dramatic standoff near a fallen log. Begins on a sun-dappled hillside covered in dry pine needles, where the mongoose cautiously approaches the cobra, which immediately flares its hood in a defensive stance. The scene shifts to a misty morning in a rocky pine forest. The mongoose emerges from behind a large rock to find the cobra already waiting on a higher ledge. Now in a high-altitude, rocky terrain with snow-capped mountains in the background, the two animals face each other next to a massive boulder under a clear sky. The confrontation moves to the base of a large tree, where the cobra emerges from a dark hollow formed by the gnarled roots to meet the mongoose. In a lush, green forest, the cobra is seen from behind as it confronts the mongoose, which is positioned among rocks and leaves at the foot of an ancient tree. At the base of a dark, imposing rock cliff, the mongoose carefully circles the cobra, which remains poised and ready to strike. The setting transforms into a vast, arid scrubland under a heavily clouded sky, where the animals face off in the open, rocky expanse. At the edge of a tranquil body of water surrounded by tall reeds, the mongoose is suddenly confronted by two cobras rising from the still water. On a rugged mountain peak, the mongoose stands before the cobra as several large vultures circle ominously in the blue sky above. The standoff takes place inside a dark, damp cave. Water drips from the ceiling as the two creatures face each other on the wet stone floor. In a dramatic forest scene during a storm, lightning flashes behind a shattered tree, illuminating the mongoose as it approaches a coiled cobra. The pair meets in a wide, sunlit valley, flanked by towering rock canyons. The low sun casts a warm, golden glow over the scene. Atop a mountain at sunset, the mongoose and cobra are silhouetted against a stunning sky of orange and red hues. By a flowing river, the mongoose stands on the green, grassy bank, staring down the cobra, which is partially submerged in the moving water. In a dense jungle with sunlight filtering through the leaves, the mongoose quickly moves across a mossy rock, circling the vigilant cobra. At the base of another massive tree, the mongoose appears to be hissing or growling, its mouth open, at the cobra standing before it. Sunbeams pierce the canopy of a forest filled with fallen logs. The cobra faces the mongoose with its mouth agape, revealing its fangs. The scene shifts to a barren, rocky landscape under a dark and threatening stormy sky, where the mongoose cautiously approaches its adversary. On a large, sunlit boulder, a sudden gust of wind whips a flurry of dry autumn leaves around the two animals as they hold their ground.
And sharp,
in a dramatic close-up, a black cobra with its mouth wide open threatens the mongoose on the dark, earthy ground. The location changes to a beautiful, sun-drenched mountain meadow filled with colorful wildflowers. A large flock of birds flies overhead as the two confront each other. The mongoose walks down a narrow path flanked by steep man-made stone walls, moving towards the cobra waiting ahead. In a serene nighttime scene, a bright full moon illuminates a grassy forest clearing where the mongoose and cobra have their moonlit encounter. The mongoose stands at the entrance to a dark cave, from which the cobra emerges, preceded by a swarm of bats flying out into the light. In a heavy downpour within a lush, mossy jungle, the two animals face off on a wet, muddy slope. On a bright, sunlit rock formation, the mongoose cautiously approaches the cobra, which is positioned defensively next to a large stone. At the base of a roaring waterfall, the mongoose and cobra stand on wet, slippery rocks, the mongoose letting out a vocal challenge. In a dry, desolate landscape, the cobra emerges from a hollow in a charred dead tree stump to meet the mongoose. The scene becomes a vast snow-covered plain with a distant snowy mountain. The mongoose and cobra face each other in the stark white landscape. On a high cliff edge overlooking a deep canyon, the standoff is intensified by small pebbles and debris falling into the chasm below. In a magical-looking forest, shafts of sunlight beam down through the mist as the mongoose approaches the cobra on the mossy ground. Amidst moss-covered rocks and ivy in a foggy mountain forest, the mongoose looks up from a lower position at the cobra. From inside a cave looking out, the mongoose watches the cobra, which is positioned on a rock at the cave's mouth, with a mountainous vista beyond. In a wide sandy desert, the mongoose launches a quick attack, which the cobra dodges before they both resume their standoff. In a close-up during a rainstorm, surrounded by wet ferns, the cobra flicks its forked tongue as it sizes up the mongoose. In a sunny, rocky mountain pass, the mongoose approaches the cobra, which is situated next to a cairn, a handmade pile of stones. In a breathtaking alpine meadow bursting with wildflowers and backed by snow-capped peaks, a flock of birds flies over the classic confrontation. The silhouettes of the two animals are starkly contrasted against a dramatic, fiery red sunset in a desolate, arid setting. In a dry, dusty canyon, both animals are on high alert, with mouths open in aggressive postures. In a peaceful forest clearing, long shadows stretch from the trees as the mongoose circles the coiled cobra in the warm sunlight. A white-marked cobra emerges from a dark hollow within the gnarled roots of an old tree to face the mongoose. The scene is a vibrant autumn hillside, completely blanketed in brilliant red and orange fallen leaves where the two creatures meet. In a bleak and rocky landscape, shrouded in thick fog, the cobra rises menacingly from the mist to confront the mongoose. At the edge of a stream, surrounded by tall reeds, the mongoose and cobra face off on the damp earth. On a rocky mountainside at night, under a full moon, with icicles hanging from tree branches, the cobra hisses with an open mouth at the mongoose. In a barren, rocky valley, the wind whips dust and leaves through the air as the mongoose stands its ground before the cobra. The animals are positioned amongst lush green bushes dotted with red berries as a flock of small birds suddenly takes flight around them. In the middle of a rushing river, the mongoose and cobra are both balanced on the same large wet boulder, continuing their fight. In a freezing ice cave, surrounded by large sharp icicles, the mongoose faces the cobra, which opens its mouth in a threatening hiss. At dawn, the silhouettes of the mongoose and cobra are outlined against a hazy, misty sunrise. In a hot, dusty desert landscape, the mongoose circles the cobra, kicking up clouds of dust as it moves. In a calm pine forest, the mongoose and cobra hold a tense standoff on the sunlit ground, covered in pine needles. In a magical forest at twilight, glowing fireflies float in the air as the mongoose confronts a cobra with menacing yellow eyes. In an enchanted-looking forest, with golden sunbeams pouring through the trees, the mongoose meets a cobra that appears to have mystical flames rising from its head. On a dry, wooded slope, covered with a tangle of fallen branches and tree limbs, the two rivals continue their face-off. At the shore of a pristine mountain lake that perfectly reflects the snow-covered peaks, the mongoose confronts the cobra as it rises out of the water. In a misty forest with bright sunlight creating a strong backlight, the mongoose walks through the haze towards the rising cobra. The pair is once again at a waterfall, this time on moss-covered boulders, continuing their seemingly endless confrontation. At the dark base of a tree with massive shadowy roots, the mongoose faces a black cobra with glowing, demonic red eyes. The final scene unfolds on a dry, rocky riverbed, where the mongoose cautiously approaches the cobra, which waits patiently beside a large stone.